I welcome you all here this morning, particularly those who are visiting our religious community for the first time. I know that many of you have joined us in solidarity after the events of this week, and this congregation is deeply grateful for your presence here this morning. I know that a number of you have joined us from other religious communities this morning, and we are deeply grateful for the solidarity of the multi-faith community. I have received calls and emails from many people in northern Nevada acknowledging their concern and offering us support. And I have said that it is not this congregation that needs support, but it is the movement for racial justice and Black Lives Matter that needs your support. As I considered this sermon for the last number of days, I thought, my goodness, how am I going to try to say everything? Well, I'm not, so hopefully the Spirit will move and I will say what needs to be said. It was 10 years ago today that I woke up in Berkeley, California. It was my first year of seminary at Star King School for the Ministry, a Unitarian Universalist seminary. The 24 of us beginning students that year arrived to the shock of the news coming out of the special city of New Orleans, Louisiana. The morning we woke up to find out that much of the city was underwater. The levees had broke after the hurricane had made landfall. People were seeking refuge in the Superdome and in the convention center. They would wait for 3 days to be rescued from those buildings. We would learn soon that the storm killed more than 1,800 people, forcing more than 1 million people to evacuate. We would also learn that despite the storm being a natural disaster, the devastation was exacerbated as a result of human inequality and human policies. As Gary Rivlin, the author of Katrina After the Flood, said in an interview on Democracy Now!, Katrina was not an equal opportunity storm, and it has not been an equal opportunity recovery. If you were a black homeowner in New Orleans, you were more than 3 times more likely to have a flooded home than if you were a white homeowner. You could look at Lakeview, a prosperous white community that was completely flooded. 10 years later, it's 100% back. It's arguably better than ever. You look at New Orleans East, a black professional class, middle class neighborhood 10 years after the storm, it may be 80% back. You look at the 7th Ward, a black working class neighborhood, 50%, 60% back. And my visits to the 9th Ward would say that they are 10, maybe 20% back. And the great shame of it is, it's based on many factors. A lack of wealth, perhaps, in the black community versus the white, but it's also based in policy, There were policies put in place that got in the way of the recovery, that made for an unequal recovery. New Orleans today has the second highest rate of the second highest gap between rich and poor of any city in the country but one. And it's not accidental. The website 538 pointed out that in the year 2000, the average black middle-class family was making $30,000. 13 years later, in 2013, the same family was making $25,000. Less money today. The number of African Americans in New Orleans has plunged by nearly 700,000 since the storm. According to the Urban League, the income gap between black and white residents has increased 37% since Katrina. And we've seen billions of federal tax dollars spent in the name of recovery that have actually created one of the largest racial disparities that we had in the history of not just New Orleans, but the Gulf Coast. Let us take a moment of silence now in memory of all those who lost their life in the storm and its aftermath, to all those who were given a one-way ticket to evacuate their beloved homes and still have not been able to return to their beloved city, even 10 years after the storm. As I told you in the story for all ages, we arrived at church on Thursday morning to discover our Black Lives Matter had been vandalized, spray painted over with the words white and black spray paint. At 11:41 a.m., after taking photographs of the sign, we posted on Facebook a message to our congregation that as of this morning has reached over 70,000 people. 70,000 people have seen those photographs. It started a dialogue on Facebook that, quite frankly, at times I found very disturbing and at other times very, very heartening. I imagine for many of you, like me, the vandalism that took place here sometime on Wednesday night or Thursday morning was frightening, because it was a violation of not only a banner, but a violation of an expression of our religious values. Maybe that fear was stoked by hateful remarks that were left on social media about Unitarian Universalist or Black Lives Matter on the websites of the Reno Gazette-Journal or My News 4. A number of congregants have expressed their concern about their own safety in coming to church. The idea of a violent incident crossed their mind. I was reminded too of the summer that I first served at this congregation, coming to Reno and hearing the news on July 28th that someone who wanted to kill liberals and Democrats fired a shotgun at members of our congregation in Knoxville, Tennessee, killing 2 people and wounding 7 others. Maybe this fear has led some of us to wonder if putting up a Black Lives Matter sign was a good idea in the first place. Are we just asking for trouble? Others might be wondering, well, who decided to put that up there? In the aftermath of this event, we must remind ourselves of our call as a religious people to bear witness to injustice and oppression. Our second reading this morning, Reverend Mark Morrison Reed reminds us that it is the task of religious community to struggle for justice. We don't do it alone, but we do it as members of this larger community. When we commit ourselves to being in community with each other, we assure that our vision is wide and our strength can be renewed many times over. That's why I was a little disappointed when I saw the headline featured in the Reno Gazette-Journal on Friday morning, "Activist Sign Vandalized." Well, I know all of you can't imagine that a newspaper headline could be sensational or misleading. Imagine that. I know. Well, it's my duty to inform you that the Reno Gazette-Journal got the headline wrong this time. This was not about some rogue minister activist going off and buying a sign and slapping it up on Del Monte Lane. No, this is about a religious community, this community, making a deep commitment to their theology of the worth and dignity of every person. It's about an entire community shouting their values from the roadside. I was so heartened on Friday when I heard from members of the multi-faith community in northern Nevada who offered to form a protection circle around our sanctuary today. Moved to express a desire to be in solidarity. And we assured those who offered the circle that though we were not in need of protection, we would love many other religious and secular communities to declare their support for Black Lives Matter movement. And this congregation again is grateful for those of you who have joined us in solidarity this morning. Now, you must know that safety is very important to myself and the staff and leaders of this congregation. So we did have a group meet at 9 a.m. this morning of greeters and welcome table staff to further understand our safety planning for Sunday mornings. But I've been thinking over the past few days about my own fear-based reaction to some of the more vitriolic responses to our sign and the Black Lives Matter movement. But I realize that my feelings are just a very small glimpse into what the Black church in the United States must experience every week. From the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama on September 15th in 1963 until the mass killing at Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina. There have been, at least according to my research, 90 other attacks, probably many more, on historically Black churches, bombs, arson, vandalism. This concern for one's beloved community, a place where people gather to pray, to study, to worship, and to organize, is real. So real for the Black church community. For this community gathered here this morning, we rarely have a heightened concern about our own personal safety when we come to our religious home. I have been reminding myself that it is only a sign. It can be replaced over and over again if that is needed. And we must remember that the many lives that have been lost as a result of systemic racism, they cannot be replaced.
10 rules. 10 rules.
10 rules.
10 rules of survival.
10 rules of survival if stopped by the police.
Number 1, be polite and respectful when stopped by the police.
Be polite.
Be respectful.
Remember that your goal is to get home safely.
Your goal is to get home safely.
Your goal is to get home safely. I'm sorry.
Number 2, if you feel your rights have been violated, you and your parents have a right to file a formal complaint with your local police jurisdiction.
Number 3, do not, under any circumstances, get in an argument with the police.
Number 4, always remember that anything you say or do can be used against you in court.
Number 5, keep your hands in plain sight.
Make sure the police can see your hands at all times.
Number 6, avoid physical contact with police officers. Do not make any sudden movements and keep your hands out of your pockets.
Number 7,
Do not.
Do not run, even if you are afraid. Number 8, even if you believe you are innocent, do not resist arrest.
Number 9, if you are arrested, do not make any statements about the incident until you are able to meet with a lawyer or public defender.
Number 10, stay calm and remain in control.
Watch your words. Watch your body language.
Watch your emotions. Remember,
the goal is to get home safely.
Get home safely.
We're thankful to the Trinity United Church of Christ, another faith community that created that video for their community and others. Maria Wright Edelman, the leader of the Children's Defense League, sent that out in one of her weekly emails that my wife Ruth and I receive. When I watched it, I thought to myself, Cruz, you may have saw Cruz this morning, he lit the chalice, my son. I have never talked to him about the 10 ways to get home safely. I haven't had to talk to Cruz about that. But I know many other parents have had that talk with their children. Their young children. Unitarians and Universalists and Unitarian Universalists have engaged in racial justice work for at least a century and a half. From the abolitionists, like Theodore Parker, you see there, to those who marched with others in Selma, including Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend James Reed, who was martyred in Selma when coming out from the cafe. His death galvanized many to return to Selma to march again. But we must know, as Unitarian Universalists, that our track record is not always good. We've not always kept our promise to you people of color, or supported those black ministers in the 20th century who attempted to plant churches in Harlem and the Caribbean. Black youth were mistreated by Unitarian Universalists attending General Assembly when they were assumed to be help and asked to carry people's bags. We were more than tone deaf when at General Assembly in Charlotte, North Carolina, people were invited to a Thomas Jefferson ball in the 1990s. They were invited to wear period costume. My friend here on the screen, Reverend Hope Johnson, and her sister asked in plenary, well, what do you think I'm supposed to wear? Rags and chains? The reconciliation was found. This event was another catalyst in our history, in our stories, that call us to be an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural community. This congregation had a large delegation at this year's General Assembly, a gathering of Unitarian Universalists in Portland, Oregon. Many in the delegation were moved by the debate and eventual passage of a resolution calling for an action of immediate witness entitled Black Lives Matter, entitled Support the Black Lives Matter Movement, and it urged congregations to take initiative in collaboration with local and national organizations fighting for racial justice against the harsh racist practices which many black people are exposed. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, gosh, I can't read that, I don't expect you to read it. I just wanted to show you that it exists. This call to support Black Lives Matter is grounded in our theologies. It's grounded in a theology of salvation that tells us we cannot wait until we die to be saved. There is too much work to be done for humanity and too much to be saved from in the here and the now. Grounded in our sense that we are saved when we belong to something that is larger than ourselves. As my colleague, the Reverend Ashley Horan, says, something that both honors the realities of our different and unequal experiences in this world because of our identities and points to the deeper commonalities and transcendent love that unite us. We are all born with inherent worth and dignity from a wellspring of love that desires our interdependence and health and has endowed us with the power to be agents of that salvation right here, right now, on this earth. It is grounded in the theology that calls us to affirm and promote the worth and dignity of every person. It is grounded in what Reverend Alicia Ford calls love abundant, that sense of interconnectedness to the web of all existence, and a call to ensure all in that web are healthy. Now, a common response that I have found to the Black Lives Matter movement has been for people to respond by insisting all lives matter. I have read many variations of this argument that a church of all people should not have a sign that says Black Lives Matter. That's dividing people, not bringing us together. Some go as far as to imagine that by saying Black Lives Matter, we are de facto saying that all other lives don't matter. So let me tell you this. When this congregation marches in a gay pride parade, we are saying that lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender lives matter. When we support women's right to choose and women's health decisions, we are saying that women's lives matter. When we collect shoes for Souls for people who are experiencing disasters and have no shoes, we are saying that their lives matter. When we pray for law enforcement officers who have died in the line of duty, we are saying that law enforcement lives matter. When we celebrate Memorial and Veterans Day, we declare that military and veterans' lives matter. When we work on comprehensive immigration reform, we are saying that immigrants' lives matter. When we schedule a vote to become a sanctuary congregation, we are saying that all immigrant lives matter. When members of this congregation work against the death penalty, we are saying that all lives matter. When we work on sustainability by installing solar panels, retrofitting our buildings, and asking each other to change our lifestyles in order to slow down global climate change, we are saying that all lives matter. When we stand with our Muslim siblings when vandals attack their community, we are saying that Muslim lives matter. When we abhor the killing of Christians by ISIS, we are saying that Christian lives matter. When we declare that an injury to one is an injury to all, we are saying that workers' lives matter. When we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act and work hard to remove the barriers to our worship and programs, we are saying that people with disabilities' lives matter. When we install a hearing assistance system needed by some people, we are saying that elders' lives matter. When we host a Transgender Allies Group open house and the Transgender Day of Remembrance service, we are declaring that transgender lives matter. When we share our offering each month over $30,000 to date with local nonprofits, we are saying to the people who are served that their lives matter. When we engage in the work of faith-based community organizing with action and help systemic change in the education, employment, immigration, and racial justice, we are saying that the lives of Northern Nevadans matter. When we worship together, join chalice circles together, meet each other at a potluck or a social event, teach religious education to our children and youth, become a member of this congregation, make a financial contribution to this congregation, we are saying that our lives matter. that other lives are not criminalized or oppressed in various ways. We remain in active solidarity with all oppressed people who are fighting for their liberation, and we know that our destinies are intertwined. Given the disproportionate impact state violence has on Black lives, we understand that when Black people in this country get free, the benefits will be wide-reaching and transformative to society as a whole. When Black people get free, everybody gets free. I was going to go through a litany of statistics, and I'm going to skip that part. I just want to tell you a story, just one little story about Caleb Moon Robinson. Caleb is the grandson of a police officer. Caleb goes to school in Virginia. One day, Caleb was at school and he was being scolded for misbehaving. He had gotten angry and kicked a trash can. The school's police officer witnessed Caleb's tantrum and filed disorderly conduct charges against him in juvenile court. Just a few weeks later, Caleb disobeyed a new rule, but this rule was just for him. The rule was that he wait while other kids left the class. The same officer was called, and as Caleb remembers, he grabbed me and he tried to take me to the office. So I started to push him away. He slammed me down, and then he handcuffed me. The police officer then took him directly to juvenile court. The officer charged him with misdemeanor disorderly conduct complaint and also with the very grown-up charge, felony assault on a police officer. His mother responded by saying, "He is autistic. He doesn't fully understand how to differentiate the roles of different people." When 11-year-old Caleb was found guilty, the judge said that Caleb had been handled with kid gloves, and that he understood that Caleb had special needs, but that he needed to man up, that he needed to behave better, and that he needed to start controlling himself, or that eventually they would start controlling him. The Black Lives Matter has lifted up the deep concern that the school-to-prison pipeline is an urgent concern. We know that African American students are 3.5 times more likely to be expelled from school than their white counterparts. We know that 70% of students involved in school arrests or referred to law enforcement are Black or Latino students. We are called to raise the alarm in our educational communities about this injustice. The movement is also deeply concerned about mass incarceration, which is now fueled by a for-profit prison and racially biased police practices, which result in disproportionate imprisonment of Black and brown Americans. We must work for prison abolition, which seeks to replace the current justice system with a system that is more just and equitable for all. We must fight for the citizenship rights of those who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated, the access to the rights to vote, to public housing, to loans to be students, and the list goes on. The Black Lives Matter movement is also fighting the long history of police brutality and bias in law enforcement. I am sure that we all can think right now of many cases where driving while Black, or laughing while Black, or walking with Skittles while Black, changing lanes without a signal light while Black, selling loose cigarettes while Black, holding your hands up while Black has led to the deaths of Black men and women at the hands of law enforcement. I received a phone call this week from a woman who identified herself only as the wife of a law enforcement officer. She was very, very upset because in the law enforcement community, according to her, it is thought and taught that the Black Lives Matter movement is anti-police. She told me how hard it is for her to wonder each day if her beloved would return home. I do not see this movement as anti-law enforcement. I see it as demanding much more accountability for the criminal actions of some law enforcement officers. So often law enforcement are assumed to have been justified in their actions or even killings, even when the facts don't seem to show that, or they are covered up or altered. In a survey of police officers, 67 said that they admitted that they do not always report serious criminal violations that involve abuse of authority by their colleagues. 84% have witnessed colleagues use more force than necessary to make an arrest. We must work to ensure that our police forces have civilian oversight and are accountable for their actions. This movement is not anti-police. This congregation is not anti-police. We are grateful for their work to serve our communities, and they must demilitarize and return to community models of policing by building relationships with people and the communities that they serve. Bree Newsom, who's on the screen now, she climbed a 30-foot flagpole in Charleston, South Carolina, and removed the Confederate flag. She said that the Confederate flag is a symbol of, folks trying to kind of hold us into the place of bondage that we had been before in our struggle the past 150 years of trying to come out of that place. But just like that sign about the activist who put up the sign on Del Monte was wrong, Bree Newsom, she didn't climb that flagpole alone. A young man named James Tyson was part of the organizing effort to take down the flag, and this is how he reflected on that day. It was his responsibility to stand watch while Bree climbed the pole and ensured she returned safely to the ground. He said of this experience, "It's critically important. It's critically important that white people actually put some skin in the game." Racism is unacceptable. White supremacy is unacceptable. Hate crimes are unacceptable. We can't live in this culture anymore. Well, ever since hearing James talk about white people having some skin in the game, I've asked myself how I have skin in the game. The sign for our mostly white congregation is one way that we can have skin in the game. Yes, it's going to make us a little uncomfortable. And what is that discomfort compared to the lessening of all our humanity that systemic racism perpetuates in all our lives? We are all less if we do not confront technological malfunction. Here we go. We are all less if we do not confront the legacy of slavery, racism, and oppression. So the many programs this year that this congregation will focus on will deepen our understanding of our work for racial justice. Our Wow Wednesday program on Wednesday evenings in October and November will be a series of gatherings understanding racial injustices and how we might interrupt them. During the series, we're inviting Erica Huggins from the Bay Area, a former Black Panther leader and political prisoner, who will teach us. We will be also creating a group of people to engage in beloved conversations, which start at the end of January with a gathering in Oakland. Beloved Conversations is an experiential and evocative curriculum that provides a container for exploring the spiritual and intellectual dimensions of the racism in our lives. Frederick Douglass wrote, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, and it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. My friends, we have got a taste of the thunder and lightning this week. We have made a commitment to plow the ground. We are called to see clearly how structural and systemic racism infects all of us. Despite our best efforts, may we recommit today to educating ourselves about racism, not only in our nation, but in our religious community. May we commit ourselves to being at the table and engaging in the hard conversations that will be necessary in the days, weeks, and years to come. May we work as a congregation in coalition with other organizations and religious communities so that Black Lives Matter will no longer be a movement, but a reality. Let's have some skin in the game. And in this moment, life and love do call us on. Life calls us on. Some of you may have heard of the folk singer Guy Carawan. He died recently this May. He had introduced We Shall Overcome, the song to the civil rights movement, sang with Pete Seeger and others. This is a song that he adapted from a spiritual. And we sang it last week. I thought we should try it again. It goes like this. Age, you gotta rise.